Hey, this is SeerNova Podcast, episode 101.
Woo!
Up. We have Ed Davis with us, first-time guest. Hopefully, we'll come back at some point because he's cool. So, you have a Kickstarter starting soon?
It started already.
Yeah.
It started on Tuesday last week, and it's right now. I think it's like 90% funded, so it's making good progress.
I feel
Nice.
like I should have known that because I think I backed it. Let me just double check. But yeah, so what is your to-do list with comic creation?
My to-do list with comic creation.
Yeah, like what do you do?
What do I do? So
Yeah.
I am the writer and publisher, kind of like all indie comic people. You end up wearing many different hats. You know, you think, I want to write a comic book, I want to put it out, and you put on a lot of hats you never thought you'd wear. But the main one, I'm the writer, publisher, and of course you have to put together the books and everything. But with this one, we're currently working at the same time on putting out issue 6 and putting everything together for a trade that'll come out shortly after we get done with issue 6, because this particular issue will close out the first story arc of the book.
Sweet. Yeah.
Nice. I was just checking out the video on the Kickstarter. It's pretty cool. Do you do the audio on top of it?
I do. Yeah, I do the narration, and then the song this time is by my friend's band. He has a band called Modern Time Machine. So when I went to LA Comic-Con, I was telling him, hey, do you have any good instrumental stuff I can throw on my Kickstarter video? So he sent me a bunch of instrumental tracks, and we used this one. And I haven't put it in my stretch goal section yet, but one of the things that people will get is when they get their digital copies, I'll send a full copy of that song for everybody.
Very cool. Nice. That's
Oh yeah, I've seen people do that. Theme songs or like a whole soundtrack or something.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. I just did a podcast on Friday, and everybody on there seemed to be a musician. So of course I didn't have much to talk with them about, because I'm thinking I can play CDs. That's about my musical skills right there. And they're talking about putting soundtracks and recording this and that, and thinking that's great. Luckily, my friend will throw a song for me, and normally I just go search for something in the public domain and slap it up there, something with the right tone. But actually an Immortal Era theme song, and it's going to get debuted when we do the actual trade next, I would say probably August or so.
Sweet.
nice. Yeah, that's always cool. That's something Greg and I have talked a lot about, is having audio additions to whatever it is that like you're doing for comics. Like whether it's even just narration over the comics in a trailer is nice, but like having some like audio feedback where like you're on a page like that might have a radio playing, and you can be like, oh yeah, this is the song that's playing. Like just little things like that is cool. But theme songs are obviously awesome too. Like you're looking at the cover art, you have that theme song playing.
Yeah, this one got done for me by one of the people who reads the book, and he just basically asked me, what do I listen to when I'm writing? And for me, it's always post-rock. So that's always my go-to thing, bands like Godspeed You Black Emperor and stuff like that. So he recorded a song that sounds similar to those.
Actually kind of goes with the art and just like the whole vibe of the series.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I'm sure it's become kind of intentional because when I write, it's pretty much always to that. So yeah, it becomes like, all right, the art fits and the vibe of the series fits with, bleak post-rock music.
Yeah, interesting question. When you're writing, do you ever actually listen to music while you're writing?
For me, all the time. When I start to write, for me, I need to go out on a run, usually a short little run, like 2 or 3 miles, and I'll put the music in my head. I'll put the music on when I start my run, and it's just to kind of clear all the cobwebs out. It's like I'm not running for a good pace. I'm not doing the normal things I do where I'm staring at my running watch and obsessively trying to get perfect times. It's more just, all right, get all the cobwebs out. Let's get rid of the day's work. Let's get rid of whatever would have been there. And then I'll take that same music after I usually go to the library when I do my writing, because it's nice to have a quiet place where nobody's going to disturb you. And there it's always music. And most of what I wrote was there's a live recording of Godspeed You Black Emperor where they played in this old church in LA. And I played that recording over and over again. So I'd say 90% of my book's been written with that in the background. And I don't even know how much I'm listening to it now. It's become almost all white noise, but without it, I can't get that concentration going.
No, that's very cool. It's like a mood setter. That's why I was curious, because the fact that you said that it always is this type of sound, I was curious.
And it's a mood setter, but what I found is lyrics throw me way off. If I hear something with lyrics, the lyrics are what I start to focus on. So anytime I do the writing, it's got to be instrumental. But classic music would not same kind of mood that I'm looking for. So it's always bleak post rock.
Oh, getting out a little bit. Gonna lose him, did we?
Hopefully for me.
Oh, there you are. All right, you froze for a second. But we heard most of what you said. But I was going to say that's interesting, because that's very similar to how I used to work. Like I would have, if I put music on the background with lyrics, like the lyrics pull you in, like so you start thinking about them. But instrumentals are fine. But classic rock, or not classic rock, classical will put me to sleep. But I can listen to heavy metal or punk instrumentals and have that in the background, and it won't bother me at all. Just because it becomes almost a white noise. But I think it's also the fact that when you're listening to that type of music, it might elevate your heart rate a little bit. It might get you excited. It might get you thinking about stuff. And I think that even if it is like white noise, like you don't really know what's going on, it's still driving something.
Yeah.
So, that's very cool.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's too lulling when you play the classical music, and I don't need to be lulled. I need focus. I need to be awake.
That's actually funny, because the lyrics don't really throw me off. Well, sometimes they throw me off, because when I'm typing, sometimes I'm actually typing the lyrics of this. But most of the time, I can listen to like a regular song of whatever kind of rock music I'm listening to, and it's just like in my head while I'm typing. But that actually does set the mood. So if I'm doing a fight, I'm listening to I don't know if you know the band Dance Gavin Dance. It's like a very weird. Yeah, that's awesome. So so
post-hardcore.
So I'm listening to like that, and then there's like a fight that's happening in the comic, and I'm like, this would sound really cool if their song was actually being played.
And I've done. In that same vein, the band Thursday, they have a song Paris in Flames, and I wrote an entire segment just with that song in my head. So there's a splash page where we see one of the characters watching the city burn.
It's funny. I'm literally looking at that page right now. He's holding onto a tombstone, looking at the city burn.
He's holding the tombstone, listening to looking at the city burn, and that song was kind of written with that Paris in Flames in mind. So when I was writing that segment of the book, that was the one time I'm playing songs with lyrics, but it was kind of that song repeating, and so once in a while I'll do that, and usually it's something loud like what you're playing.
That's awesome.
That's very cool.
I
was just gonna say it's very interesting. I just like to because that's actually, although we've talked about music in other podcasts, I haven't actually thought to ask that, like, what do people do while writing? And when you mention the music, that seems like something that I bet more than just one person does. I bet that's pretty common for people to have a certain mood setting music they put in the background. Obviously Greg was saying he does. But yeah, that's just very interesting.
Yeah, and I was writing a very depressing scene that is now actually cut from this comic that we're editing.
Oh, it didn't make it in.
No, but like I was listening to like depressing music on purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I was
you got
getting
to
all
find
emo with it.
the right tone when you're doing it.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's hard to shake the mood off when you do that kind of thing.
yeah. I'm like,
Because I'm writing a
story.
story I'm writing a story about this guy hunting a serial killer, and the tone of that, I mean, not that my story's, bright and happy, but that tone was just different than I'm used to finding. And I finished it. I'm like, ooh, wow, I got to put on some comedies and just shake off the mood I had to create to write this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Last year, I think. So I work security, so I do literally nothing.
Mhm.
I watch YouTube or listen to music, and I can actually write there. Right
Mhm.
now, I'm watching The Sopranos for the third time, but
Okay.
but I was watching Investigation Discovery for a good chunk of like last year, and
Mhm.
while I was doing that, I was actually writing the comic for our serial killer character that we have.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, and then I got like very, very paranoid, so I had to stop watching. I actually did get like super paranoid. I got home from work in the morning, and then there's this random dude that's just at a bus stop, but I was like paranoid that he was gonna do something. He wasn't gonna do anything, but like I'm like, so I like ran inside and I like locked the door, and I locked the other door that I usually don't lock. My girlfriend was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I'm like super paranoid."
There's a guy on the corner. He's looking at me funny.
You got it too deep in your head.
Yeah, I watched too much like John Wayne Gacy and all that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like watching Criminal Minds, and then you start judging people when they do something.
Yeah.
You're like, that seems suspicious. I think he's a serial killer.
I don't trust these guys.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, outside of music, is there anything else that? So you said you go for a run. You kind of got you had a clean slate with the music, and then you actually
Yeah.
listen to music in a library while working. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you do to like get in the zone for writing, or even beforehand or afterhand? Like you said, sometimes it's hard to come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think after's the hardest part, because once I'm in that zone, it's good. I mean, you hope you can get in it, because sometimes I'll try all those same things, and you get there, and it's still just you're staring at that cursor, it's blinking, and nothing's coming out. But once you get in that zone, it's kind of, I guess if I was writing happy stuff, it wouldn't be such a problem, but you have to find a way to get out of it. So it's like, all right, what can I do to get me out of this that I just had to get into? So yeah, it's pretty much whatever I can do that's the complete opposite of what I've been doing. It's like, all right, comedy, something light, and just something that won't make me think of, desolate landscapes and serial killers. So it's just snapping yourself out of that, because once you get locked in the zone, for me it's harder to get out of it. But yeah, I mean, it's good, because those days when you feel like you're in the zone and you just can never get the words to flow, those are worse. But yeah, once in, you just got to find some way to get out, and usually it's, put on something light and easy, like, okay, let's watch an episode of The Office or 30 Rock or something like that, to kind of break loose of feeling that desolation that I had to put my brain into.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then the other thing is, aside from the mood setting for this work,
Mhm.
I was curious what other works in the past or currently out there have inspired some of the, just the scenery in this. Like, because I've looked through some of the artwork, the little more demonic artwork where you got like, the death-like character, right? Like, is there some film, other comics, particular artists that have inspired some of this work?
Oh, wow. For the inspiration, it kind of comes from a little bit of everywhere, but the main thing that lit the match for this series was reading Gulliver's Travels. And he's traveling to these different islands, and he travels to one where no one can die. And that got the idea in my head, because he finds an island where everyone's immortal, but they still age, they still get sick, and he sees people that are hundreds of years old, can't think for themselves, and they're just miserable. So that kind of started it. And then where it went from the comics world was just looking at someone like Garth Ennis, who just is not afraid of anything. He'll write whatever's in his head, and he's not worried about offending you. So I kind of took it there. And then with the comic itself, the artwork, I just looked for an artist who I thought had the attention to detail that would work for kind of all the stuff that I was trying to put together. Because when it's all said and done, I've already written it out myself, my poorly sketched map of this entire world that we're going to see eventually. Right now, what we've seen is limited. We've seen the underground, which is this, abandoned subway system where a lot of the people live, and then the city, which is, big and crumbling and falling apart. So those are the two places we've seen, but this is just a tiny bit of the world. So I've had to kind of sketch lots more of it. Things like Mad Max have influenced some of the pieces in the world that we haven't seen yet, where you get that kind of barren desert landscape. So stuff like that, it hasn't been seen yet, but it's all on the horizon of the series, because I planned it out to be a 30-issue series. So we're going to start, once this first story arc ends, we start to branch out into bigger parts of this universe, and we see what's going on. So, a lot of those post-apocalyptic movies have all influenced places that we still have yet to see.
Nice. And so do you do the writing? You don't do the illustrating, coloring, stuff like that, correct?
I don't do any of that.
So when you were looking for illustrators and you're looking for colorists, just because one of the things I noticed specifically with the colorist, is that there's a lot of like grunge background colors, like there's like a scene that's like blue and yellow like crunched together, and like red and black crunched together. Was there anything in particular you looked for when you're looking at these artists?
What I wanted for the tone of the series, like for the art, I wanted it to have almost a 90s vibe, because when I started writing the series, it was in the 90s, and I wanted it to have that kind of a feel for comic books, where it wouldn't feel too modern, because a lot of nothing wrong with digital artists, but I like that he's still working on paper, doing it that traditional way, because it just has that feel I was looking for. And then for the colors, I just wanted it to have that kind of grungy feel, where it just felt like a dirty world. It's like it can be bright, but still feel just kind of ugly. And that's what I wanted it to do, because it's a terrible world. This is the kind of world where no matter where you live in it, it's just an awful place to be. So the colors and the art need to reflect that. You don't want to look and go like, that doesn't look like such a bad existence. They're immortal. They live 200 years in the future, so they got some cool new technology. Sign me up for that. No, it's just the world that you look at and say, I would never want to step foot in this terrible place, because wherever you're at is just an awful existence.
No, that's very cool. Yeah, I'm just like,
we actually are gonna go like post-apocalyptic way in the future. Like we like for our superhero stuff, we have like a while to go for that, but like that's going to happen. Like I already have that written out. So you said you like mapped it out. Do you actually drew a map and like?
I did. It is god awful, and I the few things I've had to draw and show my artist are just embarrassments, but it just shows where this is, and it's still, this is still just a small piece of the overall universe that there would be. And I've talked to people about creating a series of like an anthology series where it would just be tales from the Immortal era, and tell what's going on where you are. So, you have an artist or a writer from Australia. We know what's going on in America, but what's happening in Australia? What's happening in Asia? So many parts of the world that will never be seen in this comic book. But everybody in the world is immortal. So there's stuff going on wherever you're at. So I would love to see, just people take their own interpretation of what's going on, because we'll never leave this, even though it's a larger pocket, we'll never leave it. So I have the map of, it doesn't even really have a name, because in the series you see that basically they wrecked all the cities, they rioted and tore everything down, and then there's a few cities that were rebuilt, but most everything else is just wastelands of crumbled buildings, what's left of them. And there's people that live in all of this universe that I mapped out, but there's a larger world beyond it. So I'd love to see people's interpretation of that.
That would really be cool. Like, even if there was just like a 7-part anthology, one in every country or continent of the world, but even the one in the States, like in a different, vastly different area, that would be a very, very cool idea to like be like, oh, that's what's happening here. And actually, even more interesting would be if you could find like illustrators from that area too, so that the whatever influence they might have just because they live there would be a little bit different too.
Yeah, that would be the best thing, is to see actual illustrators from each country, not just someone who thinks they're drawing a style of that, but someone who's actually from Asia, from Australia, from Europe, and have them bring their own style into it. And then I would want the writers to be from the particular countries they're writing about, because that was, I kind of talked about it with a group of writers, and we said, yeah, like every writer, you can only write about the country you're in. So, and there's plenty of regions of the United States. So you could say, all right, you may be from the United States, but both of you are from completely different areas of the United States than I'm at. So you could write your own take on what's happening out that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, it would be very interesting to like, because even like the writing, but when you're illustrating and you want to draw a dystopian version of a place you've never visited, it's kind of difficult. But if you've lived there, you've grown up there, and you could picture like what would it be like if this was like wrecked, like you'd have a much better vision of that, just because you're physically there. And the same with the writing, like what do you think would happen? Like the locals, what would happen if things got crazy? What do you think they would do? Would they be kind? Would they be crazy? Would they what would they do?
Yeah,
so it is a very cool concept, and like an anthology for that would be super interesting. And that's something that you could definitely, I think that would be a very cool Kickstarter to run too, because you're doing it for people all over the world. So it even has a broader reach of who would want to support it. It's a very, very cool idea.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's something I'm hoping to get done by the end of the year. I've been kind of with a narrow focus of just getting this story arc finished, getting the trade out there, and then branching out from there. Because it's been just I'm so close to getting this first arc finished. I just want to get that done, and then it's like I've been talking with people about it and have some interest, and I have some people even that said, okay, I could write a cool comedy story about this concept of nobody being able to die. And I thought, because all I'm doing is just staying with the tone of my book, but a comedy would be funny to see, because you could definitely take it into different places as well.
I was gonna say, instead of even doing an you could do both. You could do an anthology around the world, and then you could do an anthology based on if people reacted differently. Like if everyone's funny and happy and they joke about it, everyone's sad and depressed, or everyone's like crazy and they're just like Mad Max in it to the extreme. Like there's definitely a lot you could do with it, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So besides your Kickstarter and your comic series, before we pressed record, actually, we were talking about comic conventions a little. We have not done one yet. We've been to, Dylan's been to one more than I have, I think. But we never like had a table. So we're gonna ask a few questions about that.
All right.
So everybody sets up their like table like differently, obviously. So do you have anything that like specifically people should have going to table?
I think the key is it depends on how many books you have. When I only had one book out, I had to find ways to make my table look more interesting. So it would be posters. I bought t-shirts. I had hats, things like that. They never sold. I mean, nobody ever walked up to my, hey, I've never heard of your comic. How about I buy a t-shirt? But if nothing else, it brings the eye to your table. Because if you have a book on your table and nothing else, people are just going to walk right by. So my goal is always to have my table loaded with stuff. Now it gets easier when you get more books out, but I still have shirts. I still have posters. I still don't sell any of them, but it's all things to bring you in. And one of the things that work for me to bring people to the table is I get my comic graded. I get CGC copies of it. And you get those high-end collectors, they'll come over to your table just because they see some CGC slabs on it. I mean, actually, I can't say they don't sell, because I do. At most cons, I can sell at least one CGC book. Maybe some guy's prospecting and he thinks, ooh, cool, if this series gets picked up for Netflix, I'm gonna sell this thing for tons of cash. But whatever their reasoning is, they'll buy it because it just kind of elevates you. They're like, ooh, wow, if this guy can get his stuff CGC, then it must be important, because people don't realize that anybody can send a book into CGC and they'll grade it. One guy said, wow, I can't believe your book's good enough to get graded. I'm thinking, it's not that hard, but you don't want to tell him that. You're like, yeah. I talked to CGC and they were willing to grade my book. And he's like, well, I got to get that then. So you have to.
It's actually interesting, because even if it's easy, it is that the idea that if you care enough about your work to submit it to it, right? Like, because not everyone knows about that. So like,
yeah.
For example, I didn't know anybody could send it there, but like that's something that makes it so that you clearly know more because you've done more research in the industry, and that alone means your comic book has more promise than other people's comics, right?
True.
Just for that sake that you've put more effort towards it. So it actually is kind of cool. Like, it still does actually have a powerful effect.
Yeah, and a rack full of CGCs, and then I have still like the posters, different variant covers of the book. I have pins, things like that. And pins, you'll find if you get pins for your stuff, they'll sell to people who won't even buy the book. There's just pin collectors out there, and they'll look up and say, oh, that one is so cute. I love that character. And you're trying to pitch them the book, like, oh, let me tell you about that character in the book. Like, no, I just want that pin. And it's like, all right.
I'm sure Timothy Fling will agree later. Yeah, he's he's been on our podcast a couple of times, and he's talked about that. Like, if a Kickstarter has a pin on it, he's more likely to back than if it doesn't, just because he wants that pin. And it is interesting, because it's kind of like just old collectibles in the past, like, just having a huge collection of these unique things of that era. Like, eventually they're gone. Like, if you don't have them, like, so it is kind of cool. Like, even if it's one-off things, and even if the comic doesn't get some Netflix series, like, you have something very unique with a pin, and it's very durable. Like, you're not worried about it getting worn down. It's metal, for the most part. So it's going to be lasting a long time. But that's very cool. So you have graded comics, posters, variant covers, pins. What else do you bring to the table?
I have shirts, and then I also have running shirts, and I've actually done okay with those, because my logo is a skeleton almost finishing a race, but not making it there, with Finish Line Comics. So I have that shirt, and then you'll see runners, they'll come up like, oh, that's such a cool logo. And, any marathoner or ultra marathoner can relate to that feeling of like, I may have finished the race, but that's about how I felt when I got to the end. So you tell them, oh yeah, I sell running shirts of this. So you make them in the tech material that you could actually go out and run a race in, and you'll sell those. The same thing. They won't buy the book, but they just like the shirt. And I usually will wear the shirt when I'm running marathons, and people will ask about the shirt. And I'm like, let me pitch my comic book at the same time. I said, but if you just want the shirt, go onto my web store and you can pick one up for yourself. So little things like that are working on a market that's not necessarily the comic book market. Now you're feeding into the runners market, and runners just like a cool new shirt to be able to run one of their races in. So people will buy that, without any knowledge or care of the comic book. So you have to have things that will grab them in. Your pin collectors won't care about the comic, but they'll buy your pins. Your runners will buy that, and then some of them will end up buying the Finish Line Comics poster just because they like that logo. So you got to try to think of markets outside of the comic ones, because if my comic, because it's going to have a limited appeal, and some people come up and they're like, I hate bloody things, and they open up to a page where a woman's getting her arm lopped off and there's blood everywhere, and they're like, oh, thank you for giving me nightmares tonight, and off they go. But they might still buy a pin or a sticker.
No, that's very cool. I also like the idea that you got running shirts specifically, because it's basically that it's more on brand than it is that that's a better seller. Like, it happens to sell because your logo matches that. So like, that's like a cool thing to keep in mind. Like, if other people, if other people have, I don't know, some frigid version of something, like a sweater might be a thing. Like, if that's like the theme of whatever you're doing. So I like that idea of like trying to match your merchandise to whatever your brand is, and or what's in your comics. Like, the pins are similar, but like having a different clothing, I think that's a clever idea.
Yeah, I guess your Arctic theme could have hoodies or something like that.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, it's interesting because Greg and I wanted to get into conventions. Basically, it was like 2020. We were thinking we were going to do it.
Yeah, like everyone.
Yeah, we're like, oh yeah, this will be the year. It's gonna be great. And then like they're like, yeah, no conventions. We're like, oh okay. So we actually ended up creating our own virtual Comic-Con because we couldn't do anything else. And so I think that was our first one, right, Greg? 2020. Then we did one in 2021. Yeah. So we did a virtual Comic-Con, and we're probably gonna still do that every year now because we're actually getting more people to come to it. It's really cool. The creators that we work with seem to like it a lot. We get to just hang out. Like, even if we don't draw a huge crowd, we all get to talk and hang out. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like a hangout session by the end of the year. There's not like really any conventions going on around that time. We do it like I think it's like the weekend after Thanksgiving.
I remember you were doing it, and I was working that San Diego Comic-Con special edition that weekend.
Okay.
We had more viewership obviously than San Diego.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. It's just like millions of people now. But
I saw that because I was going to join you guys for it, and then I got approved. And oh my gosh, San Diego! You'd think a con that's been running that long would have their stuff together, but they're 2 weeks before, like, oh, by the way, here you have a table. So yeah, it's been crazy. And WonderCon, I'm about to do that April 1st. It's the same thing. They're so slow in letting you know what you have. And it's like, man, I'm local for both. I can just drive. But if you needed to travel, if you needed to fly, that puts you at a huge disadvantage. I mean, if I got and I did get that, I think for Utah, they sent me an email 2 weeks before saying, oh, by the way, you have a table. I'm thinking, I can't pull that off.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've actually heard that the larger Comic-Cons, they, like, if you're a big creator, like, they're really like they're like helping you out like a year in advance. But for a lot of the independent creators, like, that's very last minute. I've heard that before, like for the New York Comic-Con as well. Like, it's they work really well with the big guys. And then, like, if you're in Artist Alley trying to get some stuff, they're like they're like, oh yeah, I forgot you guys are coming.
By the way, you got a booth. Show up and bring a check.
I was gonna say, you got a booth and we've already charged your account. I hope you can make it.
There was a guy that was on our virtual Comic-Con last year, Enrique. He goes by I think it's Q, or he has a show on Instagram and stuff. Enrique Lopez, and he actually like was on our virtual Comic-Con, but like I think a day or two before that, he found out he was doing like E2.
Oh wow!
He didn't know until like very like right before our virtual Comic-Con. He's like, oh, I guess I can announce that. I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, now I got to figure out how like I'm gonna get like hotel and all that stuff. To New York. And so that brings us to that. You have to travel. There was a person that actually reached out to me like a year or two ago, and we didn't do Comic-Cons yet, so it's just funny that people ask us questions about that. That's one guy that used to be on our platform, but he's not on there anymore just because he's doing his own thing. He's like, yeah, for my Kickstarter that I want to do, the biggest reward is going to be send the two people that like choose that tier. That's if people choose the tier.
Yeah.
Would go to Atlanta Comic-Con or whatever, or some Comic-Con that's in Atlanta. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Did you figure out like all of the math for that? And he's like, no. And I was like, yeah, you got to figure out like the hotel, and then are you going to pay for their hotel? And he's like, oh, they could pay for their own hotel. I was like, what?
Might want to put a little asterisk in there then.
Yeah. All of a sudden, that's a pretty crummy tier if you're having to pay for all the pieces to get you there. Because then it's like, all right, I could just buy my own tickets and hit Expedia and probably go a lot cheaper.
Yeah, because that was like his highest tier that was going to be on his Kickstarter, and I don't even think he ran it. But
okay.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where like if you like like they do international tiers sometimes and they'll do regular tiers just because like international tiers might be difficult for shipping. I'd get that for like, maybe you'd be willing to buy a localized large convention, like, oh, do you live in New York? I'll pay for the ticket of the New York convention because it is like $80 or something, so that's still a really big deal. But not book the flight and hotel, but only if they're local. So instead of going, hey, I'll bring you to this Comic-Con and you might be anywhere in the States, like that's a really big difference if they have to take a car or they have to fly, and if they have to stay overnight because they can't just fly back, or if they, because like when I went to the New York Comic-Con, I was in upstate New York. That was like, a 4-hour drive. Like that's not bad at all. I went there, spent the whole day there, and then I drove back, right? And so if someone had bought me that ticket, I would have been jacked for that. But if they bought me a ticket for San Diego and I had to fly out there, it'd be really cool. But now I got to fly out there. So, it's going to be expensive, especially like now because, I was actually just looking at flights earlier that the flights seem to be going up in price, probably because of like gas stuff.
Yeah, I saw that too. It's one of those things. But I think if you had extra San Diego Comic-Con tickets during a real year of San Diego Comic-Con, you could put that as a tier because those are.
It's impossible to get. Yeah, like I tried to get them. I think 2 years in a row I couldn't get them.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, if you're an exhibitor there, you can buy extra badges, and if you said, okay, I got 2 badges for San Diego Comic-Con, that could be a tier. Shoot, you could make tons of cash on that because nobody's able to get them.
Yeah.
But for just at that one, you don't even need to offer the hotel or anything. You're just like, hey, I got 2 tickets for San Diego Comic-Con, 5-day passes. So
I was actually, I just realized too, the exhibitors can get basically randomized ones, meaning they can give them to people. But like like if I bought a San Diego ticket, I can't just give it to someone that's registered to my name. Like they don't let you.
It'll have your name. The exhibitors get extra exhibitor badges.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they can give those to anyone because they're just exhibitor ones. And they also, the people would, you'd end up selling it to some eBay scalper because they get on the floor earlier with that, and they'd just be lined up at Mattel or Hasbro and be like, all right, I'm going to put my kids through college for these Comic-Con tickets.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. It's so weird too, because the New York Comic-Con is actually a larger convention now. Like it's bigger. There's more people, there's more events, there's more everything. But I think it's just the like nostalgia and the what's it called? The limitation of the San Diego Comic-Con that's making it so desirable now, because like I said, I think I signed up one year and I tried to get it, but I think I was like a couple weeks late. Because like you have to do it like a certain amount of time in advance, because I think they run background checks on people. And then then a whole year went by and I tried to do the next one, but it was like, oh yeah, you have to here's like the early, like so I forgot what it was, like they do like an early ticket sale,
early bird sales.
And I missed
email for that like last week or something.
Yeah, and I think I was at work the time that it happened, and then I went to get it. And it was like I went to get it after work, so it was already like it had already opened and started, and they were all sold out. It's like if you don't do it immediately, you can't get it. So yeah, I guess that would be a cool tier, but yeah, it's interesting. Cool. Well, Greg, do you have any other questions?
I don't think so.
Well, Ed, do you have any other questions? Or anything you want to shout out to the world?
Not right now. Just hopefully people want to check out the book and head to my Kickstarter. try to pick up an issue. I have back issues. You can get all the issues together if you want to get the catch-up tier. I have that for digital or physical. So hopefully, yeah. I mean, my goal right now is to just get and keep readers, because if you want to write a long series, the goal is just gaining readers the whole way along. And the first campaign, you're not really gaining readers, you're just getting pity from your family and friends, and they're throwing the money to give you that help. And now it's trying to build on that and get actual readers that continue to move along with the series.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, I'll drop your Kickstarter link in the description when this goes live, which will be Wednesday. Yeah, so it'll be on our YouTube and it'll be on Anchor, so which that goes out to like Spotify and all the other places. So cool. Thanks for coming on, and
yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was awesome conversation.